Good afternoon, class. I've got a little bit of a cold today, so you'll have to kind of ignore that if you hear that in the background. I'm trying to get over a little something, I believe, but I'll do my best here. Uh, my presentation is going to be on security that's in cloud-based infrastructures. The cloud is prevalent today, and we need to see what kind of security is related to this. All right, so we've got a security and the privacy risks that are associated with cloud computing. So we've got a loss of governance and ownership. So in this public cloud, customers are basically handing over their data in to these third-party cloud providers, be it Amazon, Google, Microsoft, whoever it is, in hopes that they are keeping their data as safe as possible. So you're kind of losing that control that you have on your own data in the ease of giving it to the cloud and letting the cloud maintain it. But with that comes, the loss of kind of ownership of it. So we got a responsibility and ambiguity. Responsibilities on this security and then privacy, they're kind of shared between the service provider, whoever it may be, and you as a customer. You have a potential for vital parts of this to be in your hands, and you're kind of giving that responsibility to your cloud provider also. So it's a two-part thing. You have to do your part, and they have to do their part, and you're kind of giving faith to them that they will hold up their end of the bargain. Okay, we've got authentication and authorization, which is a basic security step for any kind of server infrastructure. The fact that sensitive data is held in the cloud and resources can be accessed from anywhere. Anybody who has access to the internet can access this data. So that kind of gives it a little bit more of a need to establish, with a certainty that this data is being secured in the best fashion possible. Right now we've got employees, contractors, business partners, and of course end customers who are accessing this data. So we need a strong authentication authorization mechanism that allows only people who are supposed to have access to this data have access to it. We've got isolation failure. So these shared resources, that's what defines a public cloud infrastructure or deployment. The risk category for failures and mechanisms separating the usage in storage, memory, routing, or network, and during a network. That's all part of this. And to isolate each area and separate it and segment it gives you a better control over not only who has access to it, but if there is a failure in one area, where to find that failure and how to isolate and fix that problem. Excuse me. Because downtime is money lost, so that's a bad thing. We've also got compliance issues. We've got HIPAA laws. That's just the first one that comes to mind. But there are lots of compliance issues and legal issues that have to be met and requirements met. So, the cloud's customer investment is, achieving, you got to be certified, have these certifications. You've got to be able to demonstrate the compliance with whatever industry it is standards or regulatory requirements, whatever they may be. It may be lost if the cloud service provider can't provide you the evidence that they're meeting the compliance and the legal aspects of it. So you may be doing everything that you can on your part to meet requirements, but if your cloud provider is not, then you've still not met compliance according to whatever regulations your business may have. Okay. There's different types of cloud deployments. We've got private clouds, public clouds, community clouds, and these hybrid clouds. So a public cloud, I'll just go over this quickly, is the cloud infrastructure is made available, to the public. Amazon Web Services, they're cheap. A lot of them, are free. You don't get a lot of horsepower, as I call it, but they're free. They're cheap enough, and anybody can pretty much go get an Amazon Web Server based cloud instance really, really cheap. We've got private clouds too. Okay, excuse me. This cloud infrastructure, it's operated entirely, for a single entity or a single business or organization. It can be managed by the organization, or they may hire out a third party to take care of that. It may be something that exists on their premises, or it may be something that's held on, I'll use Amazon as an example, on Amazon services, or excuse me, on their servers. All right, this one was kind of new to me, but a community cloud. So this cloud it's shared by several organizations, and it supports a specific community. So it's managed by the organizations, once again, or a third party, and they may exist on a premises, on the business's premises, or once again, they may be held by Amazon, Google, Microsoft, whoever their cloud provider is at the point. And we've got a hybrid cloud. So the cloud infrastructure is a composition of like 2 or more clouds, be it private, community, or public, that doesn't matter. But they're all bound together by standardization or a proprietary like technology that enables portability, of an application that they may have developed, the data that they need to access. Once again, it's shared, but it has a common standardization to it. So the group has something in common, even though they may be different entities. I thought that was kind of interesting too. Some of the top 12, this is just what I found, cloud security threats for this year. A lot of them are, we've heard of them before. They're reoccurring. They happen every year, and they're not necessarily solely cloud-based problems, but some of them are. We've got data breaches that happens every day. Excuse me. All you have to do is open up any kind of news security, and you can see there's some kind of data breach every day. We got insufficient identity and credentials and access management. Are these people who they say they are, who's accessing your cloud data? Is there enough information here to prove their identity? Do they have the credentials to access it? Are there mechanisms in place that manage these access control levels? Insecure interfaces and application program interface, APIs. Everybody's got an API now, so you can, oh Lord, you can just unlimited. You can do all kinds of stuff with your API, whether it's as simple as automatically sending a tweet to updating weather. It's really unlimited. But this API that you're using, of course, is going to the back end of your cloud server. Is the access that API has, or that the API is given, is it secure? Okay. are the interfaces that's going back and forth between the customer, yourself, or whoever else is using this API. Has it been secured? Has it been written well? We got system vulnerabilities. That's any computer that's ever been, from your iPhone to any Android device, excuse me, Macs, PC, Linux. At some point, they've all had a system vulnerability. Um, that's that's not going to stop. As long as there's software, there's going to be vulnerabilities found. Account hijacking. Once again, that's pretty common in any computerized system. Somebody stole your password, somebody stole a username, um, a cookie has been left on a computer, and there's a multitude of ways to hijack somebody's account, and that needs to be taken into account also. Um, we've got malicious insiders. Most data breaches happen from somebody that's on the inside, whether it's a disgruntled employee. Um, Edward Snowden, he just happened to come across some data he thought everybody should know about. He had access to it. He copied it and delivered it to the public. Okay, so we've got to watch these people who are working on the inside. Do we trust them? Have they met accountability procedures and regulations? Or are we just hiring third-party people who are good at computers to manage these systems? Advanced persistent threats, those are just things like it says. They're just constantly persistent threats to a system. Excuse me. Data loss. What happens if this cloud infrastructure, God help, burns to the ground or is flooded, or some other act of God? Do they have a remote location that's set up, ready to go, a hot site backup where they can go to the next day and pick up work just like they would any other day, with no loss of data, no loss of productivity, everything's ready to go? Is that something that they've got in place? Okay. Data is very, very expensive. Cannot afford to lose it. Insufficient due diligence. Is somebody diligent enough to go through, check these things, make sure that these are all being met? That's not something you can just do every quarter, every 6 months. A lot of this stuff needs to be done on a daily basis. You don't know how many times I've had somebody say, oh yeah, we make backups, we make daily backups, no problem. And then come to find out, they never checked the backup. So they've got 6 months worth of backups, and they go to retrieve one, and come to find out, they've got 6 months of bad backups. Okay, so we've got to have somebody who's diligent enough to go through and make sure this stuff is thoroughly done. The abuse and nefarious use of cloud services. When I first heard about cloud storage or services, it was Amazon, and they're so, like I said, they're very, very cheap. But I was watching a DEF CON conference, and one of the speakers there had actually rented out for less than $20. I can't remember the exact number of just Amazon instances. They used all those instances to, give a denial of service attack towards a single entity. So they really had no hardware sitting around at home. They just paid $20, $25, $30 and launched the denial of service attack, which leads us into a number 11. So they were using the cloud-based storage to attack other cloud-based infrastructures at that point. So, people will abuse these services. Denial of service. It's like the backbone of all security. It's always been there. It probably will always be there. You can mitigate some of it. Cloudflare is one of the first ones I think of, but this is going to be an issue last year. It's going to be an issue this year. It's going to be an issue in 2019. I don't see it going anywhere or being resolved 100% anytime soon. Shared technology vulnerabilities. So there's 2 or 3 companies who share a cloud instance or share that technology. Is one going to, take advantage of a vulnerability in one of the shared groups, infrastructure, whatever that might happen to be? They found a vulnerability. Are they going to leverage that to their benefit? And just like our discussion board this week, Spectrum and Meltdown, that was new for this year, or new for late 2017. That's going to still be around and be a problem this year. So what should your strategy be for the cloud security? So an organization's current and future cloud computing needs need to be thought out, planned. What is their future? Where do they plan to go with their business? Where do they plan to go with their storage needs? What's their future plans, basically? Once you know that, you need to take into account any potential security risks that could be taking place. Note them all down, prioritize them. Make sure and think of, I know nobody can think of 100% of everything, but take note of everything that you possibly could imagine, and then once again prioritize that list. You need an overview of accountability for cloud computing. So who's going to be responsible? Overall, you need a list of who's going to be held accountable for if this happens, or if this happens, or who's responsible for this data set, who's responsible for this database. Somebody needs to be held accountable for every aspect of it in case something is to happen. Okay, security already provided, by your cloud provider. When you sign up, is that something that's covered in your SLA? You need to make sure that's read well understood. If you have questions, most cloud providers are happy to answer any questions that you have. So check in on what is their security on their end. They may not provide everything that you need. If they don't, that will be something you have to take into account for and make up for on your end. Existing IT security practices. Okay, use your existing practices, procedures, whatever they happen to be. Continue to use those. As you continue to use them, refine them. Make them better suited for your needs at that time. That's the only way that you're going to keep up, is you constantly have to monitor and change, update, and change to what you need at that time. Are there gaps between current cloud security and what you're expecting? That kind of goes back into the security that the cloud provider offers you, but any gaps that what you expect or what your expectations are, whether it's legal or from upper management, are there gaps between that and what your cloud provider is giving you? If there are, that has to be taken into account and those gaps filled. Maybe to meet compliance, legal issues, whatever it might be. There's possible technology solutions for bridging those gaps, whether it be two-step authentication, password policies, restrictions on who has physical access. All these things are to prove security and meet compliance. Okay, so some of the policies for cloud security. The scope, that is the basic cloud environments and services that are covered by no matter what it is. It's the entire scope of this whole cloud environment. Your compliance, That's the expectations of cloud security that meet federal and your user, your business, and other regulatory requirements. Excuse me. The accountability. That's the areas where people are responsible for ensuring that that it's a safe cloud environment. Who's going to be held accountable? Okay, deployment. It's a high-level view of how cloud security is going to be maintained, identified, access management, who has access to specific information, and how is that identified, and how is that user authenticated and authorized to use that data. We've got confidentiality and sensitivity. Okay, that's it's an objective analysis. So how confident should the data be? Is there specific data sets that are more confidential than others? If there are that set of data, is it held to the standards that it needs to be, or is it just kind of thrown in the mix with everything else? If there's parts of it that need to be more secure, steps need to be taken to make sure that data is more secure. Okay, we've got acceptable use. That's just the standards that you expect your end users or the developers to have, and rules they have to abide by. Most of the time that's held in a policy, an AUP, what we talked about a few weeks ago. Make sure those are clearly written. Everybody has access to it. That's one of the backbones of security. All right, so breach. What happens if there is a breach of a security or a policy? Who's supposed to know about it? Who are we supposed to tell? Okay, it's not good to just sweep it under the rug and have the public find out about it later. So there are steps and who needs to be told, and details given on what happened, how it happened, when it happened, and what information was taken, copied, whatever it might have been. Okay, some best practices to implement a strong cloud security. Network segmentation. Keep everything segmented. Every part should be separated and kept on its own. Still integrated and working as a group, but segmented as to where if something is to happen, it won't affect the whole group. Identity, access management, privileged access management. Once again, who has access to the data? What data do they have access to? And what are their rights to that data? Can they change it, modify it, just read it? That how it has to be identified and who has access to it. Discover onboard cloud instances and assets. What does your cloud provider have as far as assets? Are there things that you need, or things maybe you don't need? That goes back into that gap that needs to be filled between what you need, what they provide, and how that gap's filled. User activity monitoring, log files, of course, that's a huge thing, but what users are contacting or have activity to what material, when are they accessing it, what are they accessing it, all that needs to be monitored. Password control, that's that's a backbone of security. Do users have to change their passwords every 90 days? Do they have a certain criteria for a password? These things have to be put into place. Vulnerability management, that could be something as far as hiring a pen tester to come in, test your network for vulnerabilities. and then patching, of course, patching those vulnerabilities, hopefully. Maybe an inside person, maybe your security officer, or it may be done from an external party. Usually once you get that back, you'll repair those through, patching and maintenance. There's always going to be security flaws, like I said, so those have to be matched and maintenance taken. Encryption: is the data at rest encrypted? Is the data in transit being encrypted? That may require, a regulation. It may just be something that your company holds standard and should be taken into account. Alerts and reporting: that might be an IDS, an IPS. Are you getting emails, text messages about, security alerts that are going on at the time going off? Who's being known about this? Who's being let know about this? A disaster recovery plan: like I said before, if something's to catch fire, a hard drive's to fail, a place is to flood, it's unlimited. What is the disaster recovery plan? Companies require zero downtime, so if something bad is to happen, you need to have a plan to help recover that data, have them keep continuity in the business. And system monitoring: those are just going to be, maybe bells and whistles that go off if a hard drive is going bad, so you can take care of it before the disaster actually happens. Okay, and just some guidance here. Excuse me. So you have to ensure effective governance. Risk, compliance issues have been met. Audit: if you have to be audited every quarterly, those audits are operational, they're taken care of. Make sure it's put in as a business process, something that has to be done. Somebody needs to manage the people, roles, identity. Once again, that's a kind of an access control thing. What people have access to it, what are their roles in the company, what's their identities in the company. You need to ensure proper protection of data, especially if you're being held to a regulation or a government regulation like HIPAA. Once again, are you meeting those requirements? Enforce privacy policies. Not everybody should have access to all the data. There are privacy policies put into place. Those have to be enforced and made sure that they are being proceeded and followed well. Accesses and security provisions for cloud apps. That's just security in the cloud app. Is your provider supplying the security? Are developers meeting those requirements that may be set for them? That has to be taken into account for. Cloud networks and connections are secure. Are you using VPNs to get to your cloud provider? Do you have redundancy in ISP providers, so in case something goes down, there's a secondary way to get to this your cloud provider and keep continuity in the business? Evaluate security controls on physical infrastructure. Okay, do you have man traps into the building? Is somebody, if you have a customer come in, do they have somebody who walks them around the building, or do they just come in and walk around the building on their own? Do they have to be badged in to get to certain areas? The physical infrastructure of the building, is it secured? Okay, manage security terms in the cloud service agreement. So your CSA should specify what security measures are taking place. Those have to be taken into account for, managed, and put into your security plan. So once again, you know where you need to take procedures and fill in the gaps that you required and they are providing. And understand security requirements. Say when you leave a company, you leave a provider, and possibly move to another provider, bring your cloud on site, whatever it may be, are they allowed to destroy the data, or are they going to keep it? What is the requirements when you exit that contract between your cloud provider? These are just a few references I got. If you find it interesting, please visit these sites. I found them extremely useful. And I'd like to thank you for listening today.